As long as people discriminate unfairly or illegally against one another, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission will never run out of work. To support this large and busy advisory, enforcement, and compliance agency, there's a new chief operating officer at the EEOC. Martin Ebel joins me now. Mr. Ebel, good to have you on.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate your having me.
So tell us what the chief operating officer does, and especially in relation to the commissioners that decide the cases.
Well, at the most basic level, I manage all the aspects of the EEOC's operation. So I'm responsible for the agency's almost $400 million budget each year, and it's nearly 2,000 employees. Right now I'm working on the agency's performance report. And then because we just got the appropriations for the year, the next thing up will be our hiring authorizations and our spending plan for 2020.
Got it. And when you prepare a performance report, what are some of the chief metrics that the EEOC reports and measures itself by?
We do a lot of measuring of the input that we get, the processing that we are able to do, and the results that we're able to achieve for people who have been discriminated against. So it all kind of falls into those sorts of categories.
Okay, and let's go through what exactly the EEOC does. I guess everybody sort of knows, but I don't think anyone has the full picture. You hear and decide cases that are filed by employees all over the country in all of the industries, including the federal government. And then what happens?
Well, for both private sector and federal government employees, we provide opportunities for the parties to mediate using EEOC mediators in the event that they have cases or charges that they think can be settled in an informal way. In the private sector, we also do a lot of investigation. We collect information from the parties. We conduct on-site visits or maybe fact-finding conferences. We engage in conciliation when we believe there's a violation of the law. That's another mechanism that we can use to resolve a case short of going to full-blown litigation. On the federal side, we also have a formal appeals process that federal employees can use if they're dissatisfied with initial decisions. And we provide technical assistance to employers to help them proactively comply with the laws we enforce. Each year we have a really big multi-day training conference called Excel that's typically attended by federal but also some private sector employers. And this multi-day conference usually attracts somewhere around 1,000 attendees, where we go into all kinds of detail about how to stay in compliance with the law.
And of course, large employers are often in the news for cases or alleged discrimination. Of the cases that come to the EEOC every year, whether they're decided by the commissioners or arbitrated, what's the breakdown roughly of cases that are from large business versus small business? That's
really a function of how we define small business. If we use the Small Business Administration's definition, then about 40% of our charges come from small businesses.
What does the caseload look like every year? How many come in, how many are resolved, and how many are added to the backlog?
Sure. On the private side, our receipts last year were 72,000 plus. And that's been declining just a little bit the last couple of years. Our resolutions were more than our receipts. We resolved 80,000 charges plus, almost 81,000 on the private side. And our ending inventory in the private sector is about 43,000, 43,500 for our charge inventory. We don't really think that's a backlog. It's only 7 months of work for us. So the average processing time on those cases is under 290 days. On the federal side, we got hearings receipts of around 9,000. We had resolutions in excess of 10,000. And our ending inventory in federal hearings was just shy of 13,000. On the appeals side, we had about 4,000 receipts for federal appeals, with resolutions just about the same. But those resolutions focused very, very sharply on older cases, those cases that were 500 or more days old. And we decreased the number of those cases by nearly 84% last year. So we only have 3.2% of our inventory that's now cases more than 500 days old on the federal appeals. We're speaking with Martin Ebel. He's Chief Operating Officer of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Given all of these cases and the history of the cases, what kind of metrics do you keep on the nature and quality, if you will, of discrimination, and what kinds of trends can you discern? Is that part of the activity? Sure it is. We keep all sorts of information on the types of cases that these are, what statutes are implicated, what the bases and what the issues are. So we can break this down by age and sex and disability and race and all of the protected categories. We can talk about, if we need to, the intersection between any of those two categories. And we can look at the trends in a number of different ways. We've seen, for example, a little bit of a trend up in the sexual harassment charges over the course of the last year or two, perhaps attributable to the Me Too movement.
And what about age discrimination cases as the workforce gets older?
Yeah, we've seen a fairly steady but small increase in those cases over the last few years. And I think that your intuition on that is probably right. We'll see how it plays out. But as the workforce gets older, it only stands to reason that we would see more of those.
And what is the single largest type of violation that comes to the EEOC? Is it racial still?
It is, but there's a close second with retaliation.
That is retaliation against people that in the private sector would be what they would call whistleblowers. In the public sector?
In the federal area, we would call that reprisal.
Okay. And getting to the larger picture, I know that another allied agency like the Merit Systems Protection Board uses what it learns from its caseload and the statistics, and it publishes advisories and summaries and guidance to federal agencies for ways to avoid problems that would bring people to the MSPB. Does the EEOC do that in the private sector? Do you have a body of work developed over the decades that employers can use to maybe keep out of the place?
Yes, and a large, I think the entire body of that guidance is on our website. We're currently going through an analysis of that and looking at it to make sure that it's all up to date and current, and we're going to weed out the things that are not current and make sure that we're providing really meaningful guidance to the people who need it. We also provide technical assistance on both the federal side and the private side, where employers can ask us about certain situations and what they maybe can or cannot do.
And when dealing with cases that happen, say, in a large employer, do you also look to see if it's the result of, say, some systemic problem, some bad signal coming from the top, versus just a rogue manager, say, in a branch or factory somewhere that is acting contrary to what the company views as its proper policy?
Yes, we do. We're always interested in looking at the reasons why discrimination is happening. And obviously, as I think implicit in your question, it's easier for us to resolve and remedy discrimination that's being caused by a rogue manager. But sometimes these things are built into a process or a culture. And so we have to dig a little bit deeper. We have to look a little bit harder and figure out how to remedy those. One of the things we've done in recent years is to try to provide targeted equitable relief in the cases that we do resolve, so that the relief that we're granting or that we're getting for the people who have made the claims, and sometimes the people who are part of a group, they haven't made the claim, but they belong to the group, are going to be not necessarily helped in a monetary sense, but we're going to eliminate the practice that caused the discrimination.
And of the cases that come through every year, how many are decided in favor of the person claiming discrimination, and how often do you find, well, it really wasn't?
That number varies wildly from year to year and from sector to sector. But if we were to count all of the decisions where we have made a decision, or the courts have made a decision, or the parties have agreed to a settlement that we have been a part of, then about 15 to 16% of those resolutions contain some sort of help for an employee and or the members of the workforce where they work.
And this kind of work is something you enjoy, isn't it? This is of a theme for your whole career, isn't it?
It really is. I love doing this work. I've been very happy that I've been able to do this, because it's not everybody that can say that they get to make a difference every day, and I feel like I do. It's wonderful.
Martin Ebel is the Chief Operating Officer of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the opportunity.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Hear the Federal Drive on demand and on your device. Subscribe at Apple Podcasts or Podcast One.